Hello and welcome to Matt's Kind of Podcast. This is the first of hopefully many, it depends whether people actually like it and people actually listen, of a podcast about Matt Monro and the people in his world as such. And for that matter, my name is Richard Moore.
And I am archivist and sound engineer for the Matt Monro estate.
And we also have...
Michele Monro, Matt's daughter. So I'm definitely one of those in his world.
Well, yeah, I should hope so. And... The aim of this podcast is for us to talk about Matt and for, hopefully, if anybody actually listens, for us to get some questions from you. But we'll come to that at the end of the podcast. We'll give you an email address for you to write to. Let's jump straight in there. We're issuing this on the 1st of December, which is Matt's birthday.
He would be 94 this year. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
But I like to celebrate every year. I always put the Christmas lights up for his birthday because he absolutely loved Christmas. So, yeah, it seems fitting that we mark the day somehow. Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems also because he loved Christmas so much, it seems strange that he didn't actually record a full Christmas album. Was that ever discussed,
He just didn't get the time. I mean, they were so busy going in the studio recording for the next album or for the next single, or there was projects going on. And also, he was very, very young when he died. I presume they thought they had plenty of years.
Yes, absolutely.
It is sad, though, because he only recorded officially 2 Christmas songs, although there is a third, but they weren't the best.
The arrangements with the sort of disco-y feel doesn't do them a lot of favours.
Well, it's a bit old-fashioned. I mean, Some of Dad's music really stands the test of time, I think, whereas some of them are slightly dated.
Absolutely.
But if any of you are interested in listening to Matt's Christmas songs, they're from the album If I Never Sing Another Song, and that's available up on Spotify, or it's part of the recent Cherry Red complete EMI recordings set. Now, another thing we want to do in the podcast is talk about some of the things that have been happening more recently in Matt's world.
I mean, the year has been tinged with sadness, hasn't it, as well as a celebration of Dad's birthday. We've lost some greats this year, including Jack Jones, who was a great, great friend of Daddy's, and, of course, Quincy Jones. Now, funny enough, when Dad worked in America, it wasn't unusual to see such names as Count Basie, Billy Eckstine and Quincy Jones in the audience. And in 1969, as you know, Dad was approached to do a song for a new cine comedy. Now, Dad would have done the film because of the approach had been made by one of, in his opinion, the classiest, coolest of composers, Quincy Jones himself. Now, he lived in Marble Arch in London, near Dad, and him and Dad would talk shop and get a feel for the song. Well, it turned out to be a big cinematic hit and is probably one of Dad's most requested songs on the radio.
Of course, on days like these. And it's one of these songs that there's all sorts of different versions of it out there because he recorded it quite a few times. In fact, so the first time he recorded it was actually with Quincy himself, and that was the one that was used on the film soundtrack. Now, I've got that down, and I'm sure the date must be wrong, but according to Matt's diary, it was the 1st of January 1969, which seems strange to me that he'd be out doing a recording session on New Year's Day, but I suppose stranger things have happened. And that was the version that was used on the soundtrack, which I've never been all that fond of because it's sort of drenched in reverb, and he sounds like he's singing in the local baths, I think, really, but... not many people are aware that actually Matt recorded 2 versions for George Martin at Abbey Road. The first one, in February, has a sort of a strange Russian sound to it almost. It's very, very odd arrangement considering it's for an Italian movie. We don't know who actually arranged it either. I mean, there's no records of who did it. I mean, I'm pretty certain.
There's no notes of any kind.
No, there isn't. I'm pretty certain it wouldn't have been Kenny Clayton. It doesn't sound like a Kenny Clayton arrangement. But that version was lost, or at least we thought it was lost for a long time. I'll come back to that in a bit. And then, obviously, George didn't like that arrangement very much. So he called up Kenny Clayton and said, will you do another one? And so that's the version that we came to know, which was recorded in March of 69, which is the famous version that was released as a single and has become a classic. The lost version, I should say, it was only 2 years ago that I actually discovered the tape for that. I was working on the remasters for Capitol, and I was looking to do a remix of some of the songs that Matt recorded in Spanish, because they hadn't been mixed in stereo in the first place. And I ordered some tapes up, and on one of the tapes was On Days Like These, and I knew he'd recorded that in Spanish, so I expected it just to be the Spanish version of the arrangement that we all know. And lo and behold, it was a completely different version. It was a completely different arrangement.
Yeah, that took us back, didn't it, a bit?
It did, yes. It survived purely due to a mistake by an engineer. What happened was Matt was going over to Spain to do some recording, so they copied various things from one tape to another, backing tracks from one tape to another, for him to take with him to Barcelona to do these recordings. And it seems that the engineer made a mistake and copied the February tape instead of the March tape, which is all well and good for us because we've now got a copy of that previously lost version. So thank you to that engineer, whoever you were.
Well, it's amazing what comes up. I mean, it was only last week, wasn't it, that we found an interview in Argentina with Leonardo Schultz when Daddy was on tour. Obviously it's all in Spanish, but I mean, it's turned up after all these years.
And things continue to do so. And
Maria, that fantastic version of Maria, it's again Spanish. It seems to be that we're finding more and more Spanish archives along the way.
It is, yeah. It's strange. We don't actually know whether there is anything hiding in what would have been EMI's Spanish archive either, because it's one of those places, unfortunately, we've never been able to get access. So if any of you there listening just happen to work for what would now be Warner Spain and just happen to be able to access their archives, do let us know if you can find anything.
Well, if any of you work for any archives, please
have a look. This is true.
And do look under the wrong spelling, because as you know, Daddy always made a joke of his name and said,
that's the way it's spelled, M-O-N-R-O. It's very simple. It's an anagram of moron.
But we have got spellings with a U and an E at the end, and even on occasion with a W. So do have a good look if you work in the industry, please. That would be great. And of course, it's not just Dad's birthday, but guess what? My favourite show, Strictly, is also celebrating a landmark this year.
Absolutely.
20th anniversary. I'm so excited. I mean, as you know, Bruce was Dad's best friend. Well, in fact, going back to Quincy, just because I forgot. But of course, they didn't see each other that much. But when Dad was in America, Quincy always came to see the shows, and they remained firm friends. And in fact, for the 90th anniversary, we did an audio documentary called The Boy from Shoreditch. And Quincy did a lovely message for Daddy, which was so sweet of him. And he was the first one to reply. So that is something I will treasure forever now.
Hello there. This is Quincy Jones. As we celebrate the life of the great Matt Monro, I cannot help but remember when he recorded On Days Like These for me when I was doing the score for the Italian Job. And man, he absolutely smashed it. His musical chops and heart made him the artist we love and cherish so much. And when we lost our dear Matt, we lost a truly great artist and human being first. I hope that we will never, ever forget the music he shared with us from the heart. Those decisions were made in heaven. My eternal love to you, Matt, and your beautiful family, brother. God bless you.
But going back to Strictly, I mean, not only was it hosted by Bruce Forsyth, but then you had people like Jimmy Tarbuck taking, being a participant, which, of course, again, one of Dad's best friends. Because, in fact, the first stage show Dad worked with Bruce was at the Coventry Theatre in 1963. He never forgot his performing roots, and he would do the British seaside circuit. And, I mean, he worked, Weymouth and Blackpool, Yarmouth, Bournemouth, and they would be in summer seasons, sometimes for 16 weeks. So because of that, they all became staunch friends for life, Bruce was hosting the show. I'd love to think that Dad would have done it. He would have been dreadful at it. Because, you know, that was Dad's least favourite sport. He hated to dance. Do you remember me telling you on my 21st birthday, we went to the White Elephant on the river, and Daddy promised me a dance, and with the opening the opening music, I stepped on his foot and he went, "That's enough," and he left me standing there. And in fact, talking about White Elephant on the river, it was my pleasure to work with Lance Ellington, who was also one of the singers on Strictly, on one of the ships, because as you know, I do talks of Dad on the ships. And of course, his father was Ray Ellington, the wonderful, wonderful Ray Ellington. And he had a residency at the White Elephant on the river. So every time Dad was playing Talk of the Town, which would usually be a 6-week stint, he'd often pop in there, and of course Ray would pull him up on the stage and they'd do an impromptu song or 10 and storm the place. So wonderful memories, all stemming back to Strictly, of course. And yeah, I'd like to think that I could have persuaded him to take part, but I don't think it would have happened.
No. Oh, dear me.
But you know, those first days, when he first met Jimmy Tarbuck, Jimmy was working at the Movenpick restaurant. Within his routine, he sang My Kind of Girl, but he didn't know that Dad and Bernie Winters were in the audience. Of course, they met up and laughed about it and became great friends. And in fact, a little tidbit here, it was Dad who first introduced Tarby to golf in Yarmouth, and they played their first game at the Gloucester Golf Club with the Bachelors.
Ah, his fault then.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, those friendships going, you know, with Summer Seasons, they just stayed in place. It didn't matter if you didn't see each other for 6 months or so. It was just like, I mean, as Bruce said, he was like my brother. That's how deep it went, you know.
And he worked with some fabulous people, of course. As I know he worked, or at least was in the same town as Shirley Bassey and Morecambe and Wise and Mike Holiday.
He used to call Bassey Bert, you know. To her face, he'd go, "Hello, Bert," and she let him get away with it.
I'm not sure that there are many who'd be able to get away with that.
No. Oh, well, I mean, if they were in the same town as Dave Allen, they were like two naughty little school kids. They really were, each trying to outdo the other. When Dad was at the Castaways, Dave was down the road, and his show finished half an hour earlier than Dad's. And he came across, and this Castaways Club was sort of mocked up to look like a beach, as if it was a castaway island. And the boxes on the top were palm trees and all that. And Dave was in one of the boxes, without Daddy knowing, swung onto a palm tree down onto the stage, frightened the living daylights out of her. But yeah, they were very naughty. And then they used to sit up at night in one of their rooms, you know, playing cards all night. Good times, good times. But I think the circuits in those days, because you went to a town and you'd have more than one theatre or cabaret venue. So you'd always have someone around that you knew that you could meet up with afterwards. You know, and it's sad, really, that those days are long gone. Not just the artists who were there and brought those rooms to life, but the fact that the business isn't like that anymore. There is no places to work, is there?
No. I mean, I'm recording this not too many miles away from Blackpool. And, of course, in those days, there would have been the North Pier Theatre, the South Pier Theatre, Central Pier. There would have been...
Dad was at the North Pier.
There would have been at least another 4 or 5 theatres within Blackpool itself. And all that's left now is the North Pier, the Grand and the Winter Gardens.
And Dad loved the actual theatre at the North Pier, but he hated the route because it was a long, long way down that pier. And that's where he got taken up by a gust of wind and literally thrown, and he broke his arm on the way to the show.
Was that when he was trying to catch his hat that it would blow off?
Yeah, because his hat blew off and he ran after it and he ended up breaking his arm. But he was accident prone, so, you know, it was par for the course. But, yeah, I mean, the thing is, in those days... Say you had a new single out, you'd go on one of the variety shows or talk shows of the day, with which there were loads.
Yeah.
And then you'd be at your venue, and as you say, there'd be others around you. There'd always be someone you knew and could get together with. I mean, in Yarmouth, they did a big charity donkey derby. And Daddy won it, actually, and Lenny Henry was very upset about it. But they had great fun, and played golf and went swimming and made the most of it. But unfortunately, those days in the business are quite different now.
Yes.
But I find it sad. I mean, when you look at these X Factors and Britain's Got Talent, the only places they have to work are the massive, the O2s and the arenas. And where do they go from there? And that's the point. They don't normally. They usually, fall out of favour within a year. Very, very few have made it.
They haven't learnt their craft in the same way that your dad did. I mean, all those years.
Bruce Forsyth, all of them, Tarby, they learnt their craft and trade and deserved the breaks they got because, they'd gone the route. They'd done their apprenticeships. And these kids that go on, they do an audition and suddenly they're in the spotlight and suddenly they're doing a tour.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's hit them, I mean, the death of Timpan Alley was the saddest day of my life, really.
Yeah.
Mummy worked at Timpan Alley, do you remember?
Yes.
She worked for Mills Music, and that's how Mum and Dad met. And my mum was Britain's first woman music plugger in the business. And for anyone that doesn't know what a music plugger is, go on, Richard, you tell them.
Well, as long as I can get it right. A music plugger was somebody who basically tried to get songs recorded or played on the radio.
Exactly.
So it was less about the artist, more about the song.
Exactly. And they went round orchestras and all sorts to try and get anyone to play them. And Mills Music, the boss, wanted my mum to covet Dad into singing a couple of their songs, and that's how they met. So, if it wasn't Timpan Alley...
No, that's very true. So, going back to Ray, did Dad know Ray for a long time? Was that something that was cultivated later on in his career?
Yeah, because Ray was one of the guests on Dad's TV show, Matt's Kind of Music.
Right.
Which is in the early 60s, wasn't it?
Ah, yeah, the rediffusion one. Yes. Yeah.
So he was one of the sort of orchestra guests. Or band guests,
right. Yeah.
Dad had a different one every week, but they first met there. So, they stayed in touch. It's like, most people in the business back then, when you met people and you spent time with them, then you met up again. It didn't matter whether it was 3 months or 6 months later, you instantly gravitated towards someone you knew.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ray was a great talent, as is his son Lance.
Indeed.
And fantastic. I mean, the thing is, and in fact, because of course Lance is one of Anton de Beck's best friends, again, coming back to Strictly, and it sounds a bit incestuous when you say all that, doesn't it? It all comes round to everybody knew everybody. But I think Lance was with the show something like 17 years.
He was with it a long time, certainly, yes.
Yeah, and I miss him, actually, because he was a great vocal talent. And as I say, I worked on the ships with him, and his show was phenomenal. Because obviously on there you hear people singing the songs and you think, oh, that's good. But you don't really get a chance to hear their whole vocal range and talent. But he's a great artist.
Yes. Quite. And a very good trombonist as well, I believe.
No, that I can't comment on. I don't remember a trombone. You're probably right. I mean, you're usually more knowledgeable than me on these things. But, I mean, the thing is that a wonderful concept when Strictly was launched, so to speak, which obviously took the place of Come Dancing, which, gosh, I mean, that went on for decades. Again, very, very popular. And I think Strictly will do the same.
Yes, I can't see it disappearing despite the press's best efforts to try and destroy it. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Isn't it? The minute that someone's at the peak or the top of their game, the press is so eager to bring them down.
Absolutely.
And they make so much rubbish up as well. I mean, it was like Giovanni and Anton, they said, oh, well, they're not talking. And then they announced their show in next year, which I'm really looking forward to. I've actually got tickets, as I think you have.
Indeed, I do, yes.
And I'm looking forward to seeing that. But no, you're right. The press, I mean, I'm really surprised after the Cliff Richard debacle that there wasn't a new law brought in to temper their sort of range of, what they're allowed to do.
Yes, and indeed Caroline Flack, who, bless her, she just couldn't take any more of what had been said about her, So it's, you'd have thought things would have changed. Maybe the press themselves would have started to decide to be kinder to people, but no.
I think when you look at, whether it's Princess Diana, some wonderful people who were just hounded and hounded.
Yeah.
And for what? A headline. And let's be honest, you can't believe half of what you read anyway.
No. Only today I've seen 15 different headlines about Giovanni returning to Strictly. But actually, no, they're doing the 20th anniversary episode and there are some clips of him in there. That's all it is. But of course, they'll make these massive headlines about...
Well, he's in the Italian version at the moment.
He is indeed, yes.
And I'm grateful for that because I think he had a raw deal.
Yes, so do I.
That's my opinion and I'm going to stick to it because... No, but I do think people like the BBC and the hierarchy, they get on their bandwagons and instead of protecting their own, they're very, very eager to shed the extra weight, if you like.
Indeed.
When it comes down to any controversy whatsoever. I don't see why they didn't wait until they'd done an investigation. And I also don't understand why it took a year, until nearly the launch of this one before anything was made public. But then that's the press for you, and that's the BBC and the press, again, in cahoots, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I think the BBC are just too worried about upsetting anybody these days. They've been involved in too many scandals that...
well, when you go back to the Cliff Richard debacle, which the BBC were involved in, Cliff had the money to back his convictions, and thank goodness he won the case and gave it to charity, bless him.
Yes.
But the thing is, I really thought then, because of him taking the stance, that things would change. And if it doesn't change in that instance, I don't think it ever will.
No, you're probably right. I think...
because we've had people die because of it.
Yeah.
And if they can't take notice or heed after that... then, I'm just grateful that Dad wasn't around.
Indeed.
To be caught in any of this, the slander that goes. In fact, when Dad died, there was someone who will remain nameless who wrote some unsavoury things, and I went to a lawyer. And I never forget, I was absolutely shocked to the core when he said, you can't libel a dead person. And I went, I'm sorry, what does that mean? He said, you can write what you want.
Yes.
And that's really frightening. And it's also terrible for the families left behind. I think they forget, the press, that these are real people with real families and children and loved ones.
Yeah.
So in one way, I'm grateful Dad isn't here to see it and to see what's sort of become of the industry.
Yes.
I think I really lived through the best part of it with him. You can't replicate that era again.
No, not at all. It'll never come again, that.
Even so far as, Dad always saw his fans, as you know. He'd spend hours signing autographs afterwards or have people in the dressing room. And my brother did a show, I think it was at the Beck Theatre in Hayes. And we had a sort of a membership, and certain people were drawn out of a sort of a hat, and they were allowed to come backstage before the show and have a drink with Matthew and everything. And we got to the theatre and were told, oh, sorry, health and safety, you can't have anyone backstage anymore. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Just health and safety. Well, we won't get into that.
That's a whole new rabbit hole to get down.
That would take more than a little podcast.
It would indeed. Anyway, so let's sort of round this up for now, and I hope people have actually enjoyed this and would actually like to hear more. Please, if you would like to hear more, please do let us know via our Facebook page or our ever popular forum on the Matt Monro website, or drop us a line at pod@mattmonro.com. I'll try that again. Or drop us a line at pod@mattmonro. There. Why can't I say the words Matt Monro so all of a sudden? Right.
Well, you can't spell it, can you?
No. Let me try that again. Or drop us an email to pod@mattmonro.com, and you can leave us questions or you can tell us stories about times that you may have come across Matt yourself. Maybe you met him once and have a story
Or
about
send
that.
photographs.
Send photographs. Or maybe you have something rare squirreled away. You have a photograph that we've never seen before. You have...
And don't assume we've got it, because this actually happened with the Camé advert. I had for 18 years on every radio I ever did said, please, I'm desperate to try and find the original Camé advert Daddy did. And no. And eventually someone sent it to me 18 years on and said, oh, I thought you'd had it.
You'll be a little lovelier each day with fabulous Camé.
Yes, it was the same.
And,
it was the same with Talk of the Town, which we've, once again, it was a special that Matt did for BBC TV. And unfortunately, it's no longer in the archives. It's gone, just like so many things from that era. I'm not blaming the BBC or anything like that, because it's just what all TV companies did. And one day, a lovely lady called Sue Parker, who had been a fan of Matt's since day one, came to us and she said, oh, well, I've got this recording of Talk of the Town, talking to us as if we already had it. And we said, what?
Yeah, well, in retrospect, you see, she didn't come forward because she used to sneak a tape recorder in, which was not allowed in those days, and she'd tape show after show after show.
This is true. We have to be very grateful to Sue for all the things that she saved over the years that nobody else did.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would love it if someone came forward with Dad's Barbican show. I mean, I didn't, because it wasn't that early. It was in the 80s, and I thought somebody must have taped it. It's never come to light.
No, you'd have hoped somebody had snuck in with a tape recorder somewhere, but no.
And
so
all
far,
our Filipino fans, who I know we have a lot of, please have a look in the archives. Ask friends, maybe who work in the industry or know one of the film archive companies, because there's got to be stuff of Dad's over there.
Yes, in fact, there's a concert that was filmed, strangely enough, let's say for the Philippines. It was recorded in San Francisco, and it was made for Philippine television. And unfortunately, the copy that we have, and it's a VHS tape, is awful. The sound is completely distorted. It's unwatchable. But somewhere, we hope, because this was once again the 1980s, there might be a better copy out there. So you never know.
Well, if we've got a copy, there must be another copy.
Well, you'd think so, but I mean, it depends. When the VHS was made, it might have been made in the 80s. And so,
I suppose.
Yeah, you just don't know, because obviously VHS has been around a while now. But yes, anybody who happens to have anything that they might think it doesn't matter, just let us know. We'll say, oh, it's all right, we've got that one. But if you don't tell us, we don't know.
Richard's the musical expert, so if you've got any questions for him, or indeed for me, as I say, anything, we would love to hear from you.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up for this time. We'll see. Do leave us some feedback on social media and let us know whether you enjoyed this. And if you do, we'll be back with some more.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday, and bye for now. If you have any questions or stories, or would like to hear about any particular aspect of Matt's life, please drop us a line, send us a voice note, tell us about any rare recordings or film you may have of Matt. Write to pod@mattmonro.com. That's pod@mattmonro.com. It would be great to hear from you, and we'll see you again very soon.